Nobody in that room thought he would survive the next 10 seconds. He was not a soldier. He was not a king. He was not even supposed to be there. But he walked forward anyway. And the entire alien civilization, thousands of years old, more powerful than anything humanity had ever faced, went completely silent. Here is what nobody tells you about that moment. The throne had been waiting. Not for a warrior. Not for a god. Not for royalty. It had been waiting for him specifically. Today you are going to discover 3 things that will change how you see power forever. First, why the most advanced beings in the galaxy chose the one person everyone rejected. Second, what actually happened when that throne activated. And third, the secret the Alien Council tried to bury for 1,000 years. This is not just a story about one man. This is a story about what happens when the universe gets tired of waiting. Let me show you exactly how this happened. His name was Caleb Rourke. 23 years old. Originally from Manchester, England. Later moved to Chicago, Illinois, chasing a job that never came through. He was the kind of person most people forgot about 5 minutes after meeting him. Average height. Average build. Brown hair that always looked like he had just woken up. He worked night shifts at a shipping warehouse. He ate cold sandwiches for dinner. He paid his rent 3 days late every single month. Nobody would have written a story about Caleb Rourke. That was the point. 3 years before the throne, the galaxy had already decided that Earth was finished. The Varankai Empire had been watching humanity for 2 centuries. They were a civilization so old that their earliest recorded history stretched back to a time when humans were still drawing animals on cave walls. They had mapped 10,000 star systems. They had outlived 4 other intelligent species. They had technology that could rearrange the surface of a moon in 48 hours. And after 200 years of observation, their conclusion about humanity was simple. Not worth saving. The Varankai Council sent one final envoy to Earth. His name was Commander Sorath. Tall, broad-shouldered, eyes the color of cold copper. He carried himself the way a mountain carries itself, like nothing in the universe had ever moved him and nothing ever would. Sorath arrived on a Tuesday morning above Lake Michigan. No warning. No broadcast signal. Just a ship the size of a football stadium hovering silently in the clouds. Within 4 hours, every government on Earth knew what it meant. Within 6 hours, the panic started. Within 12 hours, most of the world had already accepted that humanity had maybe 72 hours left. Sorath did not come to negotiate. He came to deliver a single message. The Varankai had a law. An ancient one. It was called the Right of Flame. It meant that any civilization marked for removal could send one representative to sit upon the star throne of Varankai Prime. If the throne rejected that person, the civilization was erased. No second chances. No appeals. No mercy. But if the throne accepted them, everything changed. No Varankai weapon could touch them. No council vote could override it. The throne itself became the highest authority in the known galaxy. Not the emperor. Not the war council. The throne. Every civilization before humanity had sent their greatest warrior, their strongest king, their most celebrated hero. Every single one of them had been rejected. The throne had not accepted a non-Varankai representative in recorded history. Not once, not in 11,000 years. So when the world leaders gathered to decide who to send, the conversations were not about hope. They were about dignity, about going down with some kind of pride, about at least trying. Within 48 hours, a global selection process began. Every government submitted candidates. Military generals, scientists, decorated soldiers, former presidents, a chess grandmaster from Norway, a decorated war hero from South Korea, a neurosurgeon from Nigeria who had saved over 3,000 lives. 47 candidates total. Caleb Rourke was not on that list. He found out about the selection the same way most people did, through a cracked phone screen while eating a cold breakfast at 4 in the morning after his warehouse shift ended. He watched the broadcast. He saw the candidates. He recognized none of them personally, but understood what they represented. The best of the best. The strongest. The most accomplished. The most celebrated. He turned off his phone. He went to sleep. He did not think about the throne again for another 6 hours. But when he woke up, something was different. He could not explain it. Not then. Maybe not ever. But he sat on the edge of his mattress, stared at the water stain on his ceiling, and felt something he had not felt in years. Like somewhere, something very far away was calling his name. He ignored it for exactly 45 minutes. Then he got up, put on his jacket, and started walking. Nobody stopped him at the first checkpoint. That was the strange part. Caleb had no credentials, no government clearance, no military rank. He had his warehouse ID card and a jacket with a broken zipper. But the checkpoint guard looked at him, looked down at a tablet, looked back up, and stepped aside. Caleb did not question it. He kept walking. The selection facility was inside a converted sports arena on the outskirts of Chicago. Military vehicles surrounded the perimeter. Floodlights cut through the gray morning sky. News drones circled overhead like nervous birds. Inside, the 47 selected candidates were already being briefed. Generals in pressed uniforms. Scientists with thick folders of research. The Norwegian chess grandmaster sitting perfectly still with his hands folded on his knees. Then Caleb walked inches. The room went quiet for a completely different reason than the throne room would later. This silence was the kind that comes before laughter. A colonel named Harris stepped forward. He was the kind of man who had spent his whole career sorting people into categories, useful and useless, capable and incapable, worthy and unworthy. He looked at Caleb the way a mechanic looks at a car that has already been totaled. "Who are you?" Harris said. Not a question, a statement of disbelief. "Caleb Rourke. From Manchester. Well, Chicago now. This is a closed facility for pre-selected global representatives." "I know," Caleb said, "but I think I'm supposed to be here." The laughter started quiet. A few smirks. Then a chuckle from somewhere near the back. Then it spread. Not cruel exactly. Just the honest reaction of people under enormous pressure, suddenly confronted with something that made no logical sense. Even some of the scientists laughed. Harris did not laugh. He just stared. He had been doing this long enough to know that sometimes the most dangerous thing in a room was the thing that didn't fit. But he still had Caleb escorted toward the exit. That was when Commander Sorath walked in. The alien commander had been observing the selection process remotely. He had been watching every candidate, analyzing every biosignature, running every candidate through a Varankai assessment system that had been in development for 900 years. Every single candidate had failed the preliminary scan. But one signal had caught the system's attention 3 hours earlier. Faint, unusual, coming from somewhere outside the selection facility entirely. Sorath walked directly past Harris, past the generals, past the chess grandmaster and the neurosurgeon and the decorated war heroes. He stopped in front of Caleb. The copper eyes studied him for a long moment. "You," Sorath said. His voice was like gravel being slowly crushed. "You registered on the scan." Caleb blinked. "I don't know what that means." "Neither do I," Sorath admitted. That was the most frightening thing he had said in 40 years of military service. A Varankai commander who did not know something was like finding a crack in the hull of a ship you thought was unsinkable. It meant the universe had decided to stop following the rules it had been following until 5 minutes ago. Harris started to protest. There were procedures. There were protocols. There were 47 people who had been selected through a legitimate global process representing every major government on Earth. Sorath turned and looked at him with those cold copper eyes. Harris stopped talking. The next 6 hours were chaos. Emergency calls between heads of state. Arguments in conference rooms. A UN representative tried to file an official objection, which in the current situation was roughly as useful as arguing with a thunderstorm. In the end, it did not matter, because the Varankai scanner had spoken, and in 11,000 years of recorded history, the Varankai scanner had never been wrong. Caleb Rourke from Manchester, England, night shift warehouse worker, behind on rent, unknown to history, was going to Varankai Prime. And somewhere very far away, a throne made of ancient crystal and starlight began to pulse for the first time in 1,000 years. The journey to Varankai Prime took 11 hours. 11 hours in a ship that made every human spacecraft ever built look like a paper boat floating in the ocean. Sorath did not speak much during the journey, but on hour 7, he sat across from Caleb in a small chamber near the ship's observation deck and said something that would stay with Caleb for the rest of his life. Every civilization sends their best, Sorath said quietly. Their strongest, their most celebrated, their greatest warriors and their most powerful minds. Caleb nodded. And the throne rejects them all, Sorath continued. He stared at the stars outside the window. For 11,000 years I have watched civilizations fall. I have watched their greatest heroes walk to that throne with confidence and walk away as ash. And I have wondered for a very long time what the throne is actually looking for. What do you think it's looking for? Caleb asked. Sorath was quiet for a long time. Something we have forgotten how to recognize, he finally said. Varankai Prime was not what Caleb expected. He had imagined something cold, mechanical, a world built entirely for war and power. A planet that looked like it had been designed by a civilization that had never once questioned its own greatness. Instead, he found a world of breathtaking, haunting beauty. Mountains that rose so high their peaks disappeared into permanent cloud. Cities built from materials that shifted color with the movement of their twin suns. Oceans that glowed faintly blue at night from the billions of bioluminescent creatures living in their depths. Ancient forests so dense and so old that the trees had grown around entire abandoned temples. It was a world that had once loved beauty before it learned to love power. The throne room was at the center of the oldest city on the planet, a structure so ancient that even the Varankai historians disagreed on when it was built. The walls were covered in writing that predated their current language by so many centuries that only 3 scholars on the entire planet could partially read it. The throne itself sat in the center of a hall large enough to hold 50,000 people. And 50,000 people were there. Every major figure in the Varankai Empire had come to witness what everyone assumed would be another rejection. Generals, council members, scientists, military officers, citizens who had traveled from other star systems just to watch humanity's final moment. They had come to see the human fail. They had come to watch the end. Caleb walked into that hall wearing the same jacket with the broken zipper. The crowd noise was immediate. It was not hostile exactly. It was something stranger. Disbelief mixed with something close to pity. A few in the crowd exchanged glances that clearly said the same thing. This is who they sent. Caleb heard the laughter start somewhere to his left. It spread, not everywhere, but enough that it echoed off those ancient walls and filled the hall with the sound of an entire civilization dismissing a single human being in about 30 seconds. He kept walking. He did not look at the crowd. He did not look at the council members watching from elevated seats. He did not look at Sorath, standing to the side with those unreadable copper eyes. He looked at the throne, and he felt something he could not explain. The same feeling he had felt sitting on the edge of his mattress in Chicago, looking at the water stain on his ceiling. Not confidence, not certainty, just a quiet, deep pull, like walking towards something that had always been waiting at the exact place where you were always going to end up. He reached the base of the throne. He sat down. The laughter was still going. For exactly 3 seconds. Then the throne activated, and the sound that filled that hall was not laughter anymore. The light came from beneath him first. A deep, electric blue. Not violent, not aggressive. Warm almost, the way a sunrise is warm. It moved through the crystal structure of the throne like water moving through glass, finding every vein and channel in the ancient material, illuminating things that had been dark for 1,000 years. Then it moved outward. Slowly at first, rippling across the floor in concentric circles of light. Then faster. The energy climbed the walls. The ancient writing that the scholars could only partially read began to glow, all of it. Every symbol, every line, every word all at once, in the same electric blue. The crowd had stopped laughing approximately 2 seconds after the light started. By the time the energy reached the ceiling dome, the crowd had stopped breathing. The throne rose. Not the chair part. The entire crystal formation beneath it. Massive jagged spires of blue crystal that had been dormant since before anyone in that hall was born began to grow upward, slowly and silently, like a time-lapse of mountains forming. They rose around Caleb like a fortress being built to protect him. The crystal was translucent, and the light moved through it constantly, shifting and pulsing like something alive. And then the voice came. Not from speakers, not from any technology, from the throne itself. It was not speaking Varankai. It was not speaking English. It was not speaking any language anyone in that room could identify. And yet every single being in that hall understood every single word. The throne spoke for 47 seconds. In those 47 seconds, it said more than any speech ever delivered in the history of the Varankai Empire. It said that it had been built not to find the strongest, but to find the most necessary. Not the most powerful, but the most true. It said that it had seen 10,000 warriors and 10,000 kings and 10,000 geniuses, and had found in all of them the same fundamental flaw. They had come wanting to winches. They had come wanting to take. They had come with their greatness already decided in their own minds. But this one had come with nothing. No strategy. No agenda. No desire for power or recognition or survival even. Just that quiet, inexplicable pull towards something he did not understand and had no name for. The throne called it by its ancient word. The closest translation in English was something like belonging. He had not come to claim anything. He had simply come because somewhere deep in whatever he was made of, he recognized this place as somewhere he was meant to be. Not as a conqueror, not as a king, as something the ancient builders of the throne had apparently been waiting to see for a very, very long time. The Varankai Council chair was a woman named Veth. She had governed the empire for 60 years. She had seen things that would have broken most beings. She had watched civilizations end. She had ordered military campaigns that reshaped sectors of the galaxy. She was weeping. Silently, barely visibly, but the camera drones caught it. The general to her left looked like a man who had just watched his entire understanding of the universe be quietly, but completely dismantled. Sorath had not moved. He was still standing exactly where he had been standing when Caleb entered the hall. But his expression had changed. Something in those copper eyes had shifted. He looked like a man who had spent a very long time asking a question and had just, unexpectedly, finally received the answer. The energy from the throne continued to expand outward from the hall. Instruments across Varankai Prime registered it. Ships in orbit detected it. Relay stations 3 star systems away picked up the signal and began transmitting it further. The message spread faster than any news broadcast in the history of the Empire. The throne had chosen. Humanity was protected. And Caleb Rourke from Manchester sat in the center of all of it, completely still, eyes slightly wide, still wearing the jacket with the broken zipper. 3 days passed before anyone fully understood what had changed. The Varankai legal framework moved quickly once it was clear what had happened. Ancient law was ancient law. Even the most powerful council members understood that the throne's decision was not something you appealed or overturned or quietly filed away. It was, by the Empire's own foundational principles, the highest authority in existence. Humanity was removed from the removal list. Earth's star system was designated a protected zone under the oldest category in Varankai law, a category so rarely used that 2 junior council members had to physically locate the original documents in an archive that had not been opened in 800 years. The category was called Seedbed of the Worthy. It meant that whatever had produced Caleb Rourke was considered by the throne to be something the galaxy needed to continue existing. Caleb sat in a small chamber on Varankai Prime on the morning of the 3rd day and tried to process all of it. Sorath came to see him. He was not in his commander's uniform this time. He wore simple clothing. He sat down across from Caleb, the way an older man sits when he is tired of performing and just wants to talk. "They want to know," Sorath said. "What you want?" "What I want," Caleb repeated. "The throne's acceptance comes with rights, resources, authority. You could ask for almost anything within the bounds of Varankai law. A seat on the council, military alliance, technology transfers to Earth, the complete navigation, maps of this sector of the galaxy." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Outside the window, the twin suns of Varankai Prime were beginning to rise. The sky shifted from deep indigo to a color that had no English name, somewhere between violet and gold, like 2 different kinds of light learning to share the same space. "I want a message sent to Earth," Caleb said finally. Sorath nodded. "What kind of message?" "A short one," Caleb said. "I want them to know that the universe didn't save them because they were powerful, or because they were smart, or because they sent their best soldier or their best scientist." He paused. "I want them to know it happened because of someone who just showed up." Sorath studied him for a long time. "That will confuse a great many people," Sorath said. "Good," Caleb replied. "They need to be confused for a while. Confusion is where the real thinking starts." The message was sent. On Earth it was received with the kind of chaotic, complicated, deeply human reaction that perhaps only humans are capable of. Some people cried. Some people laughed. Some people argued loudly about what it meant, and whether it was really true, and whether there was a deeper political explanation that was not being revealed. And in a small town outside Manchester, an older woman named Patricia Rourke sat in her kitchen, read the message on her phone, and then sat very quietly for a long time. She had always known her son was different. Not special in ways anyone could measure. Not gifted in ways any school or employer had ever recognized. But different in a specific, quiet, unnameable way that she had never been able to explain to anyone who did not already understand it. He had always moved toward things, she said later in an interview, like he already knew they were his. Not arrogantly, not aggressively, just quietly, surely, like a compass needle finding north. Back on Varankai Prime, Caleb sat with Sorath as the twin suns finished their rise. What happens now? Caleb asked. Sorath looked out at the sky. Now, he said slowly, the galaxy starts paying attention to your species in a very different way than before. He paused. And I suspect your species is going to be very surprising. Caleb almost smiled. We usually are. The throne was still glowing softly in the great hall across the city. It had not dimmed since that moment 3 days ago. The ancient writing on the walls was still lit. Scholars were working around the clock to translate it all. The first full translation came 4 days later. It was not a law. It was not a proclamation. It was not a warning. It was a single sentence, repeated in 40 different ancient languages, carved into those walls by builders whose names nobody remembered anymore. It said, "The one who arrives with open hands will always carry more than the one who arrives with a fist." Here is the part nobody talks about. After everything was settled, after the legal frameworks were signed, and the protection orders were filed, and the galaxy moved on to its next crisis, someone went back and reviewed Sorath's original scanner data. The scanner had detected Caleb's signal 3 hours before he even woke up that morning. 3 hours before he decided to get up, put on his jacket, and start walking. Which means either the scanner detected something in him that he himself did not yet know was about to happen, or the decision to show up had already been made somewhere deeper than conscious thought. The researchers filed that finding away quietly. It made them uncomfortable in ways they could not exactly articulate. It should make all of us little uncomfortable and a little hopeful. If this opened your eyes, stay with me because the next story goes even deeper. Let's bring it all home. Caleb Rourke was nobody. He had no power, no rank, no plan. He simply felt a pull towards something and followed it. And in doing so, he did what 11,000 years of the galaxy's greatest warriors, kings, and geniuses could not do. He sat down in the right place. The throne did not want the strongest. It wanted the truest. That is the thing the Varankai had forgotten. That is the thing we sometimes forget too. Power that is forced is fragile. But something that simply belongs, that is unbreakable. If this story moved something in you, hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss a story like this one. We drop new HFYSCIF stories every single week, and each one is built to make you feel something real. Hit the like button if Caleb's story hit different for you today. And drop a comment below answering this question, asterisk if you were in that room. Would you have laughed at him too? Be honest. Watch our next video. It starts exactly where the universe leaves off, and trust me, you are not ready for what comes next.